So thank you for coming back again to answer some questions about sleep, babies and sleep, and specifically right now because it's the holidays, it's December, and people are traveling a lot more than usual. And a lot of people worry about doing that with a baby and specifically how it might interfere with the way a baby sleeps. So since you have training as a sleep expert, I would love to ask you some questions about this.
Great.
So first, what's the worst case scenario? So some people worry a lot. I'm going to go on this trip. My baby is, a borderline sleeper. We're doing it. We've got some things figured out. And now I'm worried that if I go on this trip with the baby, it's going to just throw everything off. And worst case scenario, what?
Yeah, I think a lot of times our anxieties about the travel end up being so much bigger than the actual reality of what happens. And babies are incredibly adaptable. And so when we're traveling, like you're your baby's anchor. And so I feel like when we travel and we start going places, like you're what they're seeking. So I feel like it often goes a lot better than people expect. As far as like worst case scenario is that baby has a different sleep rhythm, like that they go to bed later or they wake up earlier, or maybe they don't take as long of naps. Those might be that's literally the worst thing that could happen.
So it could be that the baby doesn't sleep as much and you don't sleep as much. And so we have some of that, but it also could be that things aren't that bad.
Yeah. And I think more likely that things aren't that bad.
Okay. So is there anything that someone could do to help prevent the worst case scenario and to maybe make it more likely that things will go smoothly with sleep while they're traveling? Or at least, more like they are at home anyway.
Yeah, I think just kind of recreating what you do at home is perfect. So however you would normally get baby to sleep, whether that's rocking, patting, nursing, cuddling them, and whatever you're doing at home, you can recreate that in the new environment. I mean, people move, people travel. Like I feel like these things are quite common. And again, babies are so adaptable. So I think just doing what you would normally do. You most certainly can take things with you, but I like to keep travel as simple as possible. So let's say you are getting a hotel or an Airbnb, you could take a pack and play, might be a little bit more portable. But do you even need that? Probably not. A lot of Airbnbs or hotels are going to have cribs or pack and plays that you can use while you're there. So you most certainly can utilize that. I mean, those would be my big ones, really. It's just kind of recreating what you would do at home.
Okay. And just for myself, I mean, my background is in psychology. So I have a psychology degree, and a lot of what, we learn about has to do with learning and motivation and conditioning and teaching. And so conditioning is the thing I keep going back to when I think about recreating your home like situation. And it doesn't have to be the exact room, the exact environment, the exact lamp that's on their bedside table. You don't have to take all of that with you, right? But can you have some things that are portable that you can start to help your baby associate with sleep? And maybe that's not even a thing. Maybe it's a song in your own voice. Maybe it's the sound of, you mentioned before, a white noise machine or something like that. Some kinds of sounds, smells. Maybe there's a particular, lotion that you like to use to massage your baby before they fall asleep. So they associate that smell with sleep. A certain kind of lighting. If it is a night light, maybe you can bring the night light with you, something. And so maybe even ahead of that travel, setting up some things that become associated with sleep for your baby that you can take with you that could help. But like you said before, the main thing is that you're there. And I think we don't give ourselves enough credit sometimes how important we are in that picture. And so as long as you're there, a lot of times the babies do just fine, right?
Yeah, and I think using those like sleep associations, if you will, using ones right from the very beginning that you can always take with you, like your own body, like cuddling your baby, singing to them, talking to them. All of these things are things that we can recreate in any environment. And so I would encourage that right from birth anyway. And so then that definitely does make travel a lot easier, simpler.
Okay. And then there are people that think, what's the big deal traveling with the baby? It's just traveling, but with the baby, and nothing's going to be any different, and it's not going to be any harder. It's going to be super fun and easy. And sometimes it doesn't exactly go that way either. What might you advise in that situation?
Yeah, I think I love the idea or just kind of thinking about how our lives don't necessarily have to end because we have a baby. They just look a little different. And so I want you to feel like parenting is fun, and I want you to feel like you can travel and go out for dinner and like go do things with your baby, but it does require some planning, and it might look a little different than it did before. For example, during the day, we might not want to just like hit the ground running and do all the touristy things and run around to museums and like whatever we do when we travel. I think you want to make sure that you're planning ahead, that like, okay, we're probably going to take a little bit longer to like get from point A to point B. Maybe we need to take a chunk of the afternoon to go back to our hotel or Airbnb to get some rest, to let the baby take naps. And I think with some proper planning, like it can still be super fun. It just looks a little different. But I do encourage putting some thought into it and not just feeling like, oh, this is going to be exactly like it was before, because it won't, but it's still fun just in a different way.
Yeah. And you being the anchor, if you're having fun, if you're relaxed, that might make it easier for your baby to have fun and be relaxed and get some sleep when they need to get some sleep. And I know for me, it was always amazing the ways that my babies would fall asleep when we were in different environments, stuff that I never thought would work at home. And we're traveling, we're with other people, we're on vacation, and they fall asleep, in the weirdest places, surrounded by things that I know that if we tried that at home, it would never work. So
I love that. That's such a great point, is that babies are, again, they're just so adaptable, and they know they're not at home. And so they don't necessarily seek those same comforts that they would. It's like, the primary parents are going to be able to soothe the baby in different ways. Like we expect something from the birthing parent and something different from the partner, right? And so like partner can't breastfeed the baby, and so they find their own ways to calm or soothe the baby. And I think that's similar in this realm, that like just because we are somewhere else doesn't mean they won't find a different way to fall asleep or even care.
Yeah. And let's say they do figure it out and they start sleeping okay, in different ways on vacation, and then you get back home. Does that mean that the babies are now ruined and they're never going to go back to sleeping the way they did before?
Yep, they're just broken. No, yes, I feel like it is so common for that to be a concern or a fear. But babies, again, just being so adaptable, really do fall right back into their rhythms. It might take a couple of days for them to get reacclimated. But again, that's where I love creating routine for babies, because they start to learn like what's coming next. So if we do things in a particular order at home each time, we just jump right back into it. And even if they're kind of like, whoa, like we haven't been doing that for a few days or the last week, like what's going on? They're going to reacclimate and just keep doing what you always did before. And it might take a few days for them to get back into their rhythm, but they will get there.
And so this conversation really is for those parents who really want to be able to travel or be in different situations, or need to be, because they have to for one reason or another. And I think it's comforting to know that all is not lost if you have to do some of this sometimes, but also if you don't have to or don't want to, that's okay too. If it causes a lot of stress and it turns out that you aren't going to have as much fun. And I feel like that's something that we don't get to hear enough. And for me personally, I did not have fun traveling with babies. I did not. I had to do it sometimes. I had family obligations and visits that needed to happen. And so I would do it anyway. But I really just didn't enjoy myself the same way I did before until I got a little bit older. And then it changed completely. So if you're like me and you don't want to do these things, or you do them and then you realize that you don't really enjoy it, it's not so fun for you, and you sort of start to dread it, know that things will change, and they'll change more quickly than we expect sometimes. And then it might be really fun to do those things again when you have an older baby or a toddler or a young kid, or whenever it happens, but that it does get very, very different.
Yeah, I think I definitely feel strongly about that in our whole parenting journey, I want us to always be doing things that feel good to us, and like really listening to that like part of ourselves that are like, no, like I don't want to do that. Then please, like, absolutely do not do that. Do not feel obligated. Use your baby as an excuse, like to say, oh, like we're trying to avoid like airplanes right now for, we don't want to get the baby sick or whatever. But if you're longing for it, like if you're like, I really want to go home for Christmas, or I really want to go see my grandparents or whatever, like I want you to feel like you can. And it really is like, I advocate for whatever it is that you want, and what you want might be totally different than what I want, and that's totally okay.
Yeah. On the good side of that is that it was never my worst case scenario, at least. Just because it wasn't this super fun trip I had wished for didn't mean it was also the worst case scenario. It never was. So that's positive. I think that's everything. Do you have any final tips, final little words of advice before we finish up?
Yeah, I think just being flexible, knowing that it might not look exactly like it did at home, but I think that's okay. If your baby goes to bed late, or you keep them out later than normal, it's okay. They're going to be okay. Baby wearing can be really lovely in helping with this too, because keeping the baby in a carrier or a sling often helps them to fall asleep, and often they will nap longer. So that way you can still be out and on the go while baby is, conked out right there on your body. You don't have to take your whole house with you when you travel. And I do think a little bit that it is a kind of a rite of passage. The first time people travel, they take their whole life with them with a new baby, and then you do it, and then you're like, oh, I didn't need half that. And so if you want to take stuff with you, definitely feel free, but just know you can take bare minimum or just the essentials and still be okay.
Yes, agreed. I definitely packed way too much the first time. And I love what you said about the baby carriers, because those definitely rescued me many times. If all else failed, they would sleep in the carrier as long as they needed. So definitely a good thing to invest in or practice with before going on a trip. So
absolutely,
a place they're comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.